Welcome to the Near Memo, a weekly conversation about search, social, and commerce. What happened, why it matters, and the implications for local. Right, so let's move on to Google's review fraud detection commentary. The FTC is in the process of formulating a rule against fake, review fraud, endorsements, testimonials, which will allow them to more aggressively go after fraudsters and impose civil penalties. And the comment period, I believe, now is over. I think it was over at the end of I think it's this week that it ends. But they basically had almost a year to submit comments, and TripAdvisor and Yelp and the National Association of Auto Dealers and a bunch of individuals did. And you can go to the FTC site, which I linked to from one of the newsletters this week, and you can just look at all those comments. And I thought the Google one was pretty interesting. Mike, what did you take away from it?
So it was broken out into three sections. The first one was titled, Google has the will. This is Google's response, has the will and incentive to combat fake reviews. And they referenced statements that some platforms that the FTC made, that some platforms may have mixed incentives to deal effectively with the problematic reviews. And despite some platforms purporting to take enforcement of problematic reviews seriously, fake and deceptive reviews continue to flourish on those very platforms. And Google said, we respectfully disagree, right? So, and they went on to say all the right words about how, fake reviews violate a consumer and business trust, and they can't abide by that. But if you look at the history, that's clearly not the case. I mean, they allowed fake and reviews to flourish from 2008, at least until 2022. How many years is that? 14 years, and they did nothing about it. So I would say that it's not so much they have a financial incentive to turn a blind eye. It's more of a passive thing. They just didn't want to expend the resources because they had no relevant income from it. So in part two, they talk about the substantial work to combat fake reviews, and they use their terms of service as proof of this, right? For example, reviews must be based on real experiences and information. Now, which is interesting, is they don't enforce that in any objective real world way. They only enforce it insofar as they can see either in the review itself or in the metadata, but they will take no external proof. Like if an ex-employee leaves a review and you have proof that it's an ex-employee, for example, Google will not accept that as a reason to take the review down. So yeah, they have these rules, but if they don't have a successful algorithm to reflect them, what the hell difference does that make? And then in the third part, they talk about our work to combat, this is the title of it, our work to combat fake reviews has been effective. We're committed to doing more to address this problem. They go on to say in 2021, which is interesting because 2022, I think they took down more fake reviews than 2021, but you pointed out that could be because there were so many fake reviews that came up early in the pandemic. But in 2021, users submitted around 1 billion map reviews, and we blocked or removed 95 million of them, and then they removed another million from user reports. So almost 10% of the reviews were removed. And then it went on to say, and this is the one that burns my ass, is our data shows that the amount of content seen by users on maps that is fraudulent or abusive is less than 1% of all the content viewed on maps. Now, what does that mean? I mean, does that mean that reviews?
It means I did not have sex with that woman.
It's like such a bogus statement because there's so much content on Google Maps, Q&A, posts, photos, hours, website links, all this stuff that they could count as interactions. And so the review interactions were 1%. 1% it's a meaningless number. And so the other thing I took away from this was just the passive voice, the sort of third party excuse, right? Businesses, this is a quote from Google, businesses may also have strong incentives to buy positive reviews, which exacerbates the problem. Right? Well, who created these incentives in the first place? Right? It was Google. I mean, they built this system that created a marketplace around fake reviews, took no responsibility for it for 14 years, and then they blame the businesses for taking advantage of this. That's crazy. And then they talk about the same thing with third-party reviews. Oh, we allow third-party reviews. We have no quality control over those. They could be bad. Well, who allowed them, right? So it is one of these totally disingenuous statements that sort of says, blame the buyers and sellers of reviews, but don't blame the systemic causes of them. And at the end, they say, that's essentially what they say, is that that the FTC should be focusing on the bad actors perpetuating fake reviews, not the platforms working hard to stop them.
That was a very that was a very sort of, we're the victim, we're not the
right.
the perpetrator.
Exactly. It's this whole passive thing where they create a system that doesn't work, and then everybody's to blame: the internet, the bad actors, whatever. It's just it. Are they not in touch with reality, or this is just the spin that they put on it?
Well, it's spin. I mean,
go ahead, Greg.
Well, so I feel compelled to explain my joke. Bill Clinton said that about Monica Lewinsky, and he used the word sex. You didn't get the joke. He used the word sex very carefully. He defined it as, sexual intercourse and not other stuff, when he was, of course, guilty of other stuff. So he was technically correct, perhaps, but still misrepresenting what had gone on. And this is what Google is doing with the word content. They're defining, people would infer from that word that they're talking about reviews, the review corpus, the percentage of total reviews that are fraudulent. But as you correctly point out, they're talking about anything and everything that might be on a profile. So it's a sort of a technicality and a misdirection a little bit. And, the 1% number, I think, is significant because it seems to be a psychologically acceptable number, or right, a legally acceptable number. Amazon says the identical thing. Only 1% of the reviews are ever, that are seen by customers are inauthentic or suspicious or whatever. They're saying the identical thing, and they may have even chosen that number to match the publicly stated Amazon number, because people can say 1%, that's tiny, that's not meaningful. Sure, we have to allow for some amount of error, and that's a socially acceptable amount.
Yeah, they don't go on to say that 99% in locksmiths are fake reviews, or 80% in moving companies are fake reviews. 1% of all content is fake or seen. They don't even say it's fake. That's compared to all the content. They say that's what's seen, right?
Right.
So it's a percentage of what's seen. So it's a number that is just so totally meaningless. That
as we learned in our own user research, like, very few people actually read reviews, right? But the fake reviews are very clearly playing a role in the ratings that everyone is seeing all the time. So
right, yes, so that those strong incentives that businesses have to buy positive reviews exacerbate the problem that poor Google has, right?
Well,
I don't know.
We need the world's tiniest fiddle here, Mike, for this portion.
There you go.
In the transparency company Uberall report that I worked on with Curtis Boyd a couple of years ago, where we compared Google, TripAdvisor, Facebook, and Yelp, about 10.7% of Google had the most fake reviews across the board horizontally. We looked at 19 categories, business categories. Google had 10.7%. I think Yelp was second, then Facebook, and then TripAdvisor in terms of declining that percentage of fake reviews. And in some of those categories, right? So the average is 10.7, and we were very conservative in coming up with that. There were certain categories like movers and locksmiths and others that were way above 10%, into the 20s. And so, I think it's very, very clear that the 1% number is completely bogus. Those numbers may have changed with Google's stronger enforcement in the recent past, but
I think goes back to our first conversation. The number is accurate. We just don't know what it means. It's 1% of all content viewed on maps. What does that mean? It's just a meaningless number, right? This goes back to the first conversation where Google couches these in definitions that we have no idea what they're referring to.
Right.
Thanks for joining David, Mike, and Greg. To stay on top of the latest developments in local, subscribe to our newsletter at nearmedia.co. We'll see you next week.